Hello, my name is Andrea and today I'm going to do some watercolor painting. Yeah! Today I'm going to be painting this frog. I drew it last night. I didn't record that part. Oh well. Let's get painting. The color I mixed is a very yellow-green. Since watercolors are transparent, you need to build up from your lightest colors in each section to your darkest colors in that section. I'm trying to do some nice even fills. I had to learn some watercolor techniques to get this right. The first few times I tried to do it, I screwed it up. Whenever I wanted an even fill, it got all patchy. And a couple things that I was doing wrong was, one, using cheap paper. If you don't use thick enough paper for watercolor, it doesn't have enough absorbency, and the water just sort of pools and the pigment doesn't spread evenly. The paper I'm using here is 5x7, 100% cotton, 140 pound paper, or in metric that's 300 grams per square meter. Another thing that made a big difference for me was to use a normal paintbrush, not one of those paintbrushes that have water inside them, the water brushes, like one of these. The water brushes are good in a pinch because you don't need to bring water with you, but you can't regulate how much water you're using. So what you get is some parts that are more watery and some parts that are less watery. And for watercolor, how watery it is determines how light the color is. So if you want it to be an even color, it's a lot more difficult to do with one of those water brushes. Another thing to note about the brush is that it needs to carry a lot of water. When I first was trying this out, I was using a brush that was kind of too small. And you can use smaller brushes. I just found that using a bigger brush that had a very small point, I could carry a lot more of the medium in the brush and kind of get a lot more done without having to pick up new paint all the time. You can kind of just spread it around. It's also important with watercolor to avoid painting right beside anywhere you just painted. Wherever the paper's wet, the paint will bleed. So to keep clean edges, you want to avoid painting two areas that are right next to each other. I got this watercolor set about a month ago. I've never been super into watercolor. I have played around with it. I mean, everybody's played with it when they were kids. I probably played with it a little more than most as a child because I was super into doing art all the time. But I never got into doing it particularly seriously. The main thing that got me interested in doing watercolor is how well it works for doing cartoony type drawings. Because I'm in animation, I love cartoons and everything, and I've seen some really cool art that's in very cartoony looking styles, and that just got me inspired, and I love doing traditional, so I wanted to give it another shot. So after doing my first pass with my lightest color, I then do a second pass with a darker color. I try to give everything a shadow, give it some nice contrast. I find working up from light colors is a little weird with contrast because you have to start in the same general tone of everything being light and then build into your darker colors, making sure to leave light areas so you develop more and more contrast as you go. In some cases, this is just simple shading, but in other cases, you need to avoid where you want a highlight. Essentially, you're painting in negative space around the lighter colors. I did this with the water. I marked it out in pencil and painted around each of these highlights. The nice thing about watercolor is that if you're using pencil, you can paint directly over top of it, let it dry, and then you can erase that pencil. In something like acrylic, you can't really do this because the paint sort of eats the pencil and makes it all gray and coats it in plastic so you can't erase it. I just suggest drawing as lightly as possible so that it comes off easily when you erase. But you can get some cool lineless techniques this way. You can also pick up some of the paint if you dab it with a Kleenex or paper towel when it's still wet. I do this when the color is way darker than I expected. This works best if the paint's still wet and you haven't let it dry yet. If it's already dry, you can re-wet it and do this a little bit, but the pigment has already absorbed into the paper fully, so a lot less will come out. Even if you do it when it's wet, it probably won't take out all the pigment, it will just take out the majority. This frog has no backstory. It's sort of just a one-off doodle turned illustration. He's just round and derpy with big lips. Or maybe she. I didn't really draw the ears, so the gender is unknown. Frogs' ears are those round things on the sides of their heads, and female frogs have bigger ears to hear the mating calls. Fun fact, that's how you can tell frogs' genders. I always really liked frogs. I like the ones that have those crazy colors, like the poison ones, or that tree frog with the red eyes, the orange feet, and the blue stripes on the sides. Normal frogs are fun too. When I was a kid, I thought it was really fun to try and catch them. They are really hard to spot because they camouflage so well, and just their eyes poke above the water. And they are slippery and jump crazy far, so it's definitely a challenge. I don't recommend going frog hunting if you live somewhere where crocodiles could be in the water. I grew up in Canada, so that wasn't an issue. This painting is coming along nicely. Got some nice details happening. I'm thinking of making this a series, one that's a bit more chill and easier to produce, so I can get some videos out more often. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to talk about during something like this. I can paint something and talk about something completely unrelated. That's definitely possible. You can ask me art person questions, animation industry questions. I don't know. I can compare and contrast the snack food options at the different studios I've worked at. You know, Nickelodeon versus Cartoon Network. They have snacks, but different snacks. I bet you're curious. Feel free to leave any suggestions in the comment section, or you could send me a tweet or something. It's at Andrea Gerstmann. That's my name. With the water, I did a third pass with an even darker shade of blue. I do the same sort of negative space thing, using the pencil to mark out where I wanted to avoid, and then painting in the negative space around all the little hot dog shapes, making sure they continue behind the grass. I also put a little shadow under all the lily pads with this color. This step really makes the piece, I think. It adds a lot of contrast and really makes everything pop. I do a few final touches, sign it, and that's the finished illustration. I really like how this illustration turned out. Let me know if you'd like me to make this available as a print. And thanks so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!